Sheep. I'm with the Heritage Institute for Sustainability, and I'm representing the Texas PACE Authority. The Texas PACE Authority was founded in 2015 as a nonprofit organization with the goal of streamlining the implementation of the PACE-funded clean energy projects in Texas called PACE in a Box. PACE in a Box was passed by the Texas Legislature, Senate Bill 385 in 2013, which enables local governments to create property-assessed PACE energy districts. So it's a voluntary program allowing property owners to make energy and or water-related improvements and pay for them over a period of up to 20 years through an assessment on their property. This program levels the playing field for businesses who previously had financial barriers to upgrading their buildings. Government building administrators can get long-term financing through SECO to support energy efficiency projects. Now building owners can get long-term financing through the Texas PACE in a Box program. This program allows energy efficiency upgrade to be paid for through energy savings, depreciation, and tax incentives. This program is critical to the reliability of the Texas energy grid. Electricity demand across the Texas market is set to rise to 218 gigawatts by 2031, according to ERCOT. This projected increase of 150 gigawatts over the record set of 85.5 gigawatts in the 2023's record-breaking heat wave. So I'm here today to educate you guys about the Texas energy grid and the issues we're up against. And Texas PACE Authority, we'd like to come and speak to various city council meetings and also to the Chamber of Commerce members so that the building energy owners know that there is funding available for them to upgrade their buildings. And we also encourage cities to set aggressive energy reduction goals and to consider creating foundations for matching TPA grants to reduce the load on the Texas energy grid. Why is this important? Local banks can become PACE lenders, local contractors can become trained and become Texas PACE Authority service providers. Local businesses can upgrade their equipment and reduce energy consumption. And the energy grid will be more reliable for the city of Coppell, and that's the most important part of this whole thing. So Texas PACE Authority is here to help make sustainable energy grid a reality. So I'm just here to educate you guys, and if you'd like me to come to any other meetings, I'm more than willing to do that, to help educate everybody about the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments this evening.
Professional.
What's that?
Impeccable timing.
Oh. All right, moving on. Item B is discussion regarding bond refunding. Ms. Tien, thank you.
You want to go to A?
Oh,
Would you like to do A?
what did I do? Did I skip? I'm sorry, thank you. Item 3A, presentation of the 5-year forecast. No wonder Kim was looking at me weirdly.
We're just skipping over that.
Jessica, Vanessa, and Adam.
Made us in a rush.
I was moving on to item 2, so.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. What we're sharing today is the 5-year forecast for fiscal years 25 through 29. Really is an internal planning tool that has guided staff for close to 30 years. While it's not a policy document or a proposed budget, it plays a critical role in helping staff identify long-term trends, anticipate challenges, and develop strategies that ultimately shape the proposed budget presented to you each year. As you may recall, we did not present the forecast last year. However, given Council's continued interest in understanding how our internal processes align with community needs, and how we prioritize and fund services. This presentation was brought back to provide a clearer picture of the work taking place behind the scenes. This insight into the city's financial planning process helps illustrate how decisions are developed prior to council's formal budget deliberations. The city of Coppell continues to be recognized for its strong financial planning and prudent budgeting practices. We hold the highest possible bond ratings. We hold the AAA from Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and have received the GFOA Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for 34 consecutive years, in addition to the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for 15 consecutive years. These recognitions are not coincidental. They are a result of the intentional financial planning supported by tools like the 5-year forecast. Through the same framework, the city has been able to fully fund major initiatives like the Capital Replacement Fund, the Enterprise Solutions Replacement Fund, and most recently funding key facility and traffic projects for the next 5 years in the Infrastructure Maintenance Fund. This forecast is grounded in the vision and direction you've provided and also councils before you through the City Council's Vision 2040, strategic goals, and your annual work plan and priorities. It reflects a deep citywide collaboration led by assistant directors with facilitation and support from the Strategic Financial Engagement Budget Team, ultimate decision-making and leadership from the City Manager's Office and directors. The result is a shared set of strategies that will continue to evolve as we move forward towards the fiscal year 26 budget season. While the full 5-year forecast document provided to you serves as a reference manual for long-term planning across all funds, including special revenue funds and other funds, tonight's presentation will focus primarily on the general fund. Specifically, we will take a closer look at fiscal year 26 and the strategies that departments developed and are developing in preparation for the upcoming budget. To walk us through the story of collaboration and forward thinking, I am pleased to introduce to you Vanessa Tarver, our Assistant Director of Strategic Financial Engagement, and Adam Richter, Assistant Director of Community Experiences. They are representing the Assistant Director group this evening and will guide us through the trends, challenges, and strategies outlined in the 5-year forecast. Special thanks to the Assistant Directors for their leadership of this process and the SFE budget team for their time and effort in preparing the 5-year forecast document. And thank you again for your continued leadership, support, and policy direction. With that, I'll hand it over to Vanessa and Adam. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jessica, for that introduction, and good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Vanessa Tarver, and I'm the Assistant Director of Strategic Financial Engagement. And I'm excited to be the one that kicks off going through this timeline for you today. And it really shows the collaborative work that all goes into building this 5-year forecast document. It provides insight in how legislation, strategies, and requests impact the budget not only in this current year, but in years going forward as well. And of course, I have to give a big shout out to the budget team. Y'all do such an amazing job bringing everyone together and owning this process and creating the beautiful document that's in front of us today. So just thank you for all the work that you do for us. And now we'll go into the agenda. It's lengthy, but it's really broken out into 3 pieces. It goes through the day 1 Assistant Director Retreat, day 2 Assistant Director Retreat, and then it goes through the strategies as well. Now this lengthy slide is the timeline it takes to get you the 5-year forecast document today. It really is a 7-month timeline from the initial feedback meeting up until the presentation today. And it shows that in the January 2025, where the Assistant Director Retreat took place, the conversations really started back in November. So it took all that time and collaboration within the departments to bring all the great requests and the forecasts together, and those are what's present in the document. Now this is the start of the Assistant Director Retreat, and it truly shows the pinnacle of the collaboration that is within this 5-year forecast process. And the Assistant Directors were seated in the middle, and who is not shown are the managers and administrative services that support us through this process. They're really the ones that help put all the requests in, help add the forecast items in, so they're a huge part of this process as well. And the first thing that we were provided with 3 key points to facilitate our thinking for throughout the day. The first one was delivered by Mike Land, and you will see that he's, I know the picture's small, but he's way in the middle over there, giving us his first piece of the day. And he provided direction for the next 5 years. And his direction was, how are we being creative and innovative in our thinking to set us up for success in the years forward? Next was the mindset shift. We had previously been very revenue-centric, but now we're bringing in that expenditure-centric approach as well. So not just focusing on what is that increase in property tax value, what's going to happen with sales taxes, but it's also bringing in that approach of expenditures from, let's take the fiscal year 25 budget, increase it by the 4% inflationary rate, and ideally that is our fiscal year 26 budget. So really marrying those two, really marrying those two pieces together to shift that mindset. And then a maximum of 10 high rankings. I'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation, but that was brought forth by the budget team, and it refined the process on how we ranked the requests that were brought forth by the departments. Now there are numbers on this slide, and it does correspond with the page that's in the 5-year forecast. It's going to be on page 35. It just gives you a pretty little graph that shows these numbers. And the numbers were really the introduction to the day. We were shown that there were $79 million in operational requests. So think of your contracts, the programs that we put on, salary and benefits are all rolled into that $79 million. Next are the $3 million of general fund requests. And both of those combined were the anticipated, or the forecasted expenditures for fiscal year 26 of $82 million. And each of those 3 million or 30 requests originated from individual departments. They were internally vetted by the leadership teams, the administrative teams. They were evaluated that they aligned with the 2040 pillar, or with a 2040 pillar, and prioritized overall within their departments. And once they had finalized all those requests, they provided those to the budget team, where they do their magic and they provided us a master listing of 30 different requests and provided it to the AD team for their review. And just in regards to that $79 million, the assistant director team really went into great lengths to discuss what are the increases, the decreases, and even the reallocation of budget, because we know the success of the 5-year forecast is relying upon this process where we're allowed and expected to challenge each other's thinking regarding the forecast. And the collaboration just continued into the ranking and prioritization process. As I mentioned in the last slide, each department did their own internal ranking, but now is the time for the assistant directors to take all 30 requests and do a ranking overall. So each department had time to explain the importance not only to their department, but the organization and how it would serve the community. They also shared that if I was fire and I had 4 requests, if I had to pick just one that was labeled as high, it would be XYZ. So that just showed the collaboration. If it's not just my department needs these 4 things, it's I understand the needs of the community and we need to work together to meet those needs. And high, medium, low does not mean that the mediums and lows are not important. It just means that funding would be allocated in that direction. So we would want to cover as many highs as possible, then flow down to the mediums if we had more funding, and we'd love to cover the lows if we had that funding as well. And we were able to achieve that spread of high, medium, low because the budget team asked that we only had 10 highs. As you can see, we met that expectation. We did have 10 highs that were ranked, and that led to really great discussions on having a true understanding of what those requests are so we could properly label them. And then we also did use, if there were any one-time expenditures, could we utilize that strategic reserve? Now for my people that like art graphs, we have a visual representation of how the $3 million was broken out by department. So if you look at the middle of our graph, and then fire corresponds with the orange, and it just goes around clockwise as you go down the labels. If you want to see a detailed listing of what makes up those numbers, it will go through page 41 through 57, gives a detailed listing of what each department has requested, and that's shown in the graph. At the end of the day, this is where we landed in the forecast. And please note, we are using the 3.499 property tax revenue increase, and that was from a council direction from the January retreat. And the 79 million are the forecasted expenditures. Forecasted revenues are 79 million. So the shortfall before the request was 3.3. And if we added all the requests of 3 million, we had a shortfall of 6.3. While that is not what we would love to see, what it does provide us is an awareness. And you can see that expenditures are increasing faster than revenues can grow. The timing of this document gives us time to develop strategies to address the shortfalls that we're seeing in this document. We're not looking at this document to make a solution, but it's an excellent point in time tool that gets us closer to arriving at a balanced budget. Because while we have ranked all the fiscal year 26 requests, we also put in requests up until fiscal year 29. And that's important so we know where we are really landing for the rest of the fiscal years. Because as we can see, there's just a gap that continues to grow between where we need expenditures to go versus where our revenues are only able to grow. And we're now calling it the Austin gap. It was the duck bill before, that's where it was renamed from. It's called the Austin gap so it can accurately represent where this gap is coming from, and that's from our friends in Austin and their legislation.
So, I'm sorry, what did you call it?
It's the Austin gap.
The Austin gap.
Austin. Okay, thank you.
No problem. And with that, I will hand it over to Adam, who will talk about the day 2
So
strategies.
we've had a couple of questions come up, so before you hand off, would you mind answering a few of our
course.
questions?
Yeah.
Don?
Just to clarify, just make sure I understand, the $3 million, those are $3 million of, I think it's 30 requests and making it $3 million. That is to be funded out of just fund balance? Is that the idea? Those are not operational
No.
expenditures?
No.
How is that different than operational expenditures?
So the $79 million, let me say this. The current budget, existing operations and maintenance, was increased basically by 4%.
Okay. Is that just an inflation?
That's just
or
carrying what we're doing today
Okay.
and moving it forward
Okay.
from an operation and maintenance standpoint. Anything above that is in addition to.
Okay. So the 3 million is,
So the
there's
3
not one
million
time.
is what they're looking for, the various departments throughout the entire organization is looking for. And that is before, the reason why I really wanted y'all to wait on questions is because it's going to get into this. That is before they take a look and see, are these actually general fund expenditures, or are these funds that go to other special funds?
Right, okay.
So, remember, this is an internal tool that is used by staff to help guide us in the development of the budget, based on previous direction from the council. So we use it as a planning tool. Just to put it in perspective, when she mentioned how long we've been doing it for some of the council members that have been on the council a while, it goes back into the 1990s. It literally used to show tax rates at 80 and 90 cents. Because all it was doing was projecting out, this is what the revenue needs to cover all of our expenditures. That's not the philosophy that we take in our preparation and planning. Our revenues, as we discussed before, are now limited. So the problem is, when we call it the Austin gap, is making sure that we cover what we can actually generate in terms of revenue.
And I think you answered one of my other questions about, you mentioned it's now, we're focused on expenses now also.
So we've
as
always
part
been
of-
focused on expenses,
Well,
but
there's more of a,
the attention to the expenditures is growing faster than the revenues are being allowed to grow.
okay, and so with what you just said a while ago about it used to be you would just figure out what we need and just make the revenue whatever you needed. You had the flexibility to do.
Through the 5-year forecasting, we were basically just adjusting the tax rate. Again, I go back to,
When you had,
well, that was just the way it worked. That was the internal plan, and then it wasn't being used the same way we use the 5-year forecast now. That's the answer to the question.
Okay.
We have changed the way we use the 5-year forecast. We use the 5-year forecast to introduce discipline into understanding that our revenues are now capped because of the Austin gap, and with using sales tax at the rural level, You put those two things together, that's why the revenue shows what it does. The revenue cannot grow,
Right.
and this is what we said in 2019 when SB2 was introduced, or 2019. I mean, the way it's set up, the equation is the tax rate will continue to go down as long as appraised values go up, and we are capped on our revenue. We don't get the value of that growth or the benefit of it. And so it's just, you have to change the way you do business.
Yeah. And the 4%, that's sort of a proxy for inflation, just
Yeah, I mean, when you
doing
go.
what we do now, and it's gonna cost us roughly.
Right, I mean, Kim and her team, they basically
Approximately.
use CPI, calculate it, use it.
To come up
you know,
with, to do what we're doing today.
Right, they use the federal government's calculation for, and then plug in that particular rate. Right now, I think it's around 4%.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
So I
Thanks.
apologize for asking the questions, but I found that I was getting distracted because I was remembering my questions and not being able to get them answered. So I think it's good that we kind of take a break and do that. Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Vanessa, thanks for the presentation. Can you go back one slide, please? One more? Yeah. So this revenue of 75 million, that is based on the limitation of the 3.499 tax, so that's 3.499 above of last year.
That's correct.
Right. And just there's a minor typo in the printout. The request has a different number in the printout. I think it's a typo.
Oh, apologies, we'll take a look at that. I apologize.
So the actual number is 3 million, 3,044,000. Okay, thank you.
Now I'll hand it off to Adam.
Well, hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Bijou?
Yeah, can you explain the 6.3 million shortfalls in detail?
I think we're going to get there.
Well, hold on just a minute. Maybe you want to understand your question, because she indicated that there are pages in the book that have the details of what all those requests are.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking. I'm asking you, is that what you're asking? Do you want to know what it all is that adds up to the 6 point?
Yes.
That's in your book.
Yes, and I think there's a few specific page numbers I can provide to help you navigate that. So page 41.
Also, my understanding is it's not a shortfall. This could be the shortfall if we decide to go down this path, correct?
We're identifying, for forecasting purposes, when all the departments say this is what we would like to have to serve our community, it adds up to more than we have in revenues. So,
Correct. So the key point is we are upside down.
No,
we are not.
I mean-
For planning purposes, we're identifying that there would be less revenue to cover our expenditures. We use this then to work the budget to bring you a balanced budget. So it's really important that you hear this. This is not a budget.
Right.
This is a planning document that we use internally that we are sharing and have shared in the past with council to let y'all know, here are the kinds of things we're looking at as it relates to the budget. And so importantly, the slide that she had that showed for 27, 28, and 29, it compounds with that. So if you recall, we talked about $8 million at one point in time. So this gives you the background of how did you come up with that number, right, in terms of what's going on. So it's a combination of just the general growth of operations and maintenance and requests for whether it's fire trucks, ambulances, backhoes, I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? Okay?
Anything else?
Yeah, I have a couple. At the very beginning, you were showing the timeline when the ADs met. One of those meetings was actually before our fall retreat in January. My question was, how did that retreat impact the 5-year forecast planning?
At those meetings, they're starting just to be collecting the data. It's the planning on the revenue side is when y'all discussed going ahead using the 3.499. That's then plugged into the revenue.
So that was just automatic.
Well, once you told us what the direction was, that set what the revenue would be.
Okay, got it. Then, I don't know what slide number it was, you were still talking about the general fund projected operations was 79 million. Does that compare to our 74.5 million this year, or what is the comparison to this year's?
Not bring this up yet.
It should be 4% lower.
No, it
So let me,
is.
so Mayor, yes, so this year it was 74.3.
Yeah.
Is the operating expenditures for the general fund.
Which would be the 79 that was being presented here? Thank you, that's what I thought, I just wanted to make sure.
It's
You understand?
operations.
Not really, Mayor. I thought this 79 is 4% above of last year.
Well, it's more than 4% because it also includes the salaries and benefits, which for fire and police, as an example, there's a built-in $1.5 million. So before I even add the 4%, there's a $1.5 million growth.
Okay.
And so you apply, there's certain things that are happening underneath there that are just, I'll call them fixed.
Thank you. I did not
But
realize
but
that.
for those things, services, and so for the ones that aren't fixed, we applied 4%.
So that's why the term Austin Gap is very appropriate, because they didn't take all that kind of details into account when they put the percentage at 3.5%. My last question, and this is just because I'm one of the data guys here. All of the prioritized requests for the future look like they averaged out right at 100,000 each. Was that just random, or were they really that?
They weren't on
That
average
seems
of
to be
100,000 apiece.
Okay,
Happy coincidence, yeah, definitely.
okay, and because there were 10 of them at 1,093,000, 13 of them at 1.2, and 7 at 697. So they averaged out. It just looked too pretty. Okay, that's all I had. Sorry to interrupt, guys, but it's good to get questions out of the way because I was dwelling on them in my mind.
I appreciate it.
The importance is the process that staff uses to get you from here to a balanced budget, right? That's the whole process that we're wanting you to take away from tonight.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good evening, Mayor and Council. After that grueling day one, the assistant directors came back stronger than ever on day two for more at LSP. We were broken up into groups when we arrived on site, and we were tasked with a two-part exercise. Part one included going through all of the requests for the upcoming fiscal year and identifying alternative funding sources. I'm so sorry to do that every time. In part two, we reviewed, prioritized, and decided together as a group on the remaining requests. All of this work was designed to help us alleviate the pressure being put on the general fund. And I am proud to report, on behalf of the assistant directors, that our work on day two resulted in us completing what we had set out to accomplish. We reduced requests for the general fund by a total of 19 and reduced that dollar amount by roughly 2.5 million. All of these requests align with Vision 2040. And here's the updated pie graph for the general fund request by department following our work on day two. On this slide, you'll see a listing of the different strategies that were discussed on day two. I feel confident speaking on behalf of the other assistant directors when I say that I think that we all really enjoyed the process and the exercises for identifying potential alternative funding sources, working with each other to prioritize and decide on the projects, as well as discussing the potential use of strategic reserves. And here is the chart from earlier in the presentation that has been updated to reflect the work that we accomplished. The lines to focus on are the bottom two, which look a lot leaner after the 19 requests and the 2.5 million have been reassigned. Here on this slide, you will see a snapshot of the progress that we made from day one to day two. Also, I can assure you that the projects that you no longer see on the right on the day two graph are still being completed. They just aren't shown here as they've been reassigned. After the AD retreat, the next step was to present to CMO and the directors. In the weeks following that presentation, feedback was captured by the assistant directors and our SFE team on information and strategies provided by CMO and the directors. From there, further strategies were discussed and developed. Looking ahead to fiscal year 26, 3 strategies were identified to help close the Austin gap, which include a $1.1 million reduction in the transfer from the general fund to the self-funded insurance fund, a $1 million reduction in the transfer from the general fund to the IMF. This transfer reduction would be offset by a $1 million increase in budgeted interest income within the IMF. So in other words, what that means is that the interest income makes up the decrease in the transfer, and there is no loss to our service. A $500,000 reduction from the general fund to the capital replacement fund. Once again, doing this results in no loss of service. And here is an updated chart if the strategies from the previous slide were to be implemented. In the middle section, you will notice that these are the transfers that were paused in fiscal year 25, and per council's direction during last year's budget workshop, they will resume in fiscal year 26 to support the ongoing maintenance of city facilities and traffic infrastructure. This information was confirmed during the recent departmental budget review meetings. This is why the shortfall increased from the earlier 5-year forecast analysis on the left, indicating a shortfall between 1.3 and 2.2 million. Therefore, the 2.2 million shortfall is the one that we are currently developing strategies to address by budget season. And one additional note is that the request for street transfers was 1.6 million at one point, but the Public Works Department determined after the initial budget reviews that only 1.1 million was needed. So that's a reduction of 500,000 as shown on the screen. These reductions of 2.6 million brought the fiscal year 26 general fund closer to the 3.499 revenue scenario. And the leadership team is currently evaluating final strategies to close the remaining gap with a focus on presenting a structurally balanced proposed budget by fiscal year 26. With that being said, I will pass it over to our city manager, Mike Lang.
So here's using the term shortfall, knowing it's a planning document. So here's where we've sent this out to the organization because it's going to involve everybody. The first is we're taking a look at reorganizing roles as vacancies occur. So even looking at our current situation with vacancies and looking forward as vacancies occur, we are asking our department directors, leadership team, and our staff to take a look at those particular roles and what they provide, what services they provide. Are there different ways to provide those services without necessarily hiring back a position? So we're going through that effort as we speak. Leveraging technology to handle routine tasks. As y'all know, with the advancement of technology, it's outpacing everything. Everybody's a vendor that wants to sell us something, so we have to be really strategic in what we do. But I'll use the SFE department in particular, whether it's bots or some other automated systems that can handle a lot of the accounting, bank reconciliation, those kind of things. It's take the routine and automate it, right? And so how did we use automation to create efficiencies and less cost? The other thing is continually looking at our contract for services to make sure, A, we're getting provided the services that they say that they're supposed to, and also making sure that we are bidding them when we're supposed to, that we're evaluating the bids, we're evaluating what the work is that we're asking them to do to make sure that that's happening. And then this is one that is the hardest one of all, thoughtfully stopping activities that bring limited value to the community. The reason why I say it's the hardest because in this community we say yes a lot and things continue to be done. And so it's kind of that, I hate using that terminology. It's using the return on investment analysis as it relates to the services that are being provided. There are pockets of services being provided to people who love those services, but they may be just a handful of people. And can we or should we continue to provide those particular services? And you will be engaged in more of those kinds of discussions because that's where the rubber hits the road for the folks. So that's how we're moving forward and have been moving forward, actually with the directors since this past November, and working through this. So that is the 5-year forecast process. You have, I know you received the link, so it's digital, and you have in print, because some of us like to have the book to look at and make our notes on and everything along those lines. It truly is a planning document. That's its only purpose, and its only purpose is to help us in the development and the formulation of the budget. How this translates is that it makes, because quite frankly, they're already working on the 25-26 budget, so this work folds into that. So the idea that there is a revenue shortfall, if you will, puts them all on notice so that they're not arbitrarily just, we shouldn't see anything new. If anything, we should see where we've taken into account these 4 bullets in this process. So I think that concludes our presentation on the 5-year forecast. Correct? Just want to make sure because the next slide I think says questions.
And then after that, we'll do the budget calendar.
Right, okay, got it. So happy to answer questions.
Don?
So I think you may or may not be aware, I can get bogged down on some of the ins and outs of some of the numbers and how things transfer. And that's what I really am trying not to do, because I certainly trust that y'all do a great job at this whole process. What is crystal clear is what Mike is talking about is this process that you go through where you're using a lot of modeling and data to point you to where there are gaps or where there are things that need to be addressed. And I think that is, it comes through crystal clear, and I think that is wonderful the way you are approaching this and the way that you're looking at what do we need, where do we need to adjust some things based on the constraints we have. And projections are just, at times can be garbage in, garbage out, because the data that goes in initially spits out an answer, and so, but it still directionally gives you an idea of where we need to go and where do we need to address things. And I think y'all have done a great job at addressing that, or maybe you've always done that and I just understand it better today. But thank you for this presentation and just pulling the curtain back on sort of what the process is, because it helps a great deal. So I thank you very much for all of that. Y'all have done a great job at that and at this presentation.
So now when you're in my peripheral view, so I can't see you.
I just didn't think it was fair that Don got to go first twice. I'd actually really like to echo what Don said. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of it. It almost seems like that there was you simulate like a think tank, like using a real world scenario. I appreciate the fact that it was the assistant directors in the think tank and then presenting that to the CMO and the directors. I think that creates forward thinking and potential, potential roles for the future and forward growth. So kudos to you guys for being a part of that, and Mike, just the leadership that you're showing your team to critically think through those hard decisions. So just appreciate that. So really wanted to piggyback on Don with that. Second thing I wanted to ask was the transfer into the IMF. It was reduced by $1 million, correct, because of interest that was accrued in the IMF fund. I want to make sure I understood that correctly.
It was both in, there were 2 funds.
Yeah, but specifically the IMF.
Streets and IMF.
The capital replacement.
Capital replacement.
Okay.
Yes,
because
of interest, yes.
Now, is that due to the fact that we did the big transfer last year?
That's.
And so that resulted in, I'm getting my budget years all.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah, but that was a result, it was, I think, the 35 million? 31, sorry, I've slept since then, but, so that was a direct result of that money being transferred over. It generated the extra interest to be able to offset that transfer going in of $1 million.
Yes, and it will continue to generate that additional
With that
interest
big
going
fund,
in.
with that big
Yes.
fund balance. Okay, excellent, just want to make sure I understood that point. All right, thank you.
Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon of beating you guys up. Amazing job. This is fantastic. And like Don said, I'm sure you guys are doing a great job every year. This is the first time I'm understanding it. So thank you. Like Kevin said, great job that the assistant directors got together and the leadership blessed it. What I really liked is you saw, okay, I want the people listening in to understand there is no shortfall. This is a planning document, and the team looked at what needs to be done, and they saw that we don't have as much money to do that. Then you guys met again on day 2, came up with alternate strategies, and I really love the slide where you're talking about all the different things you're considering, like automation, even looking at some sacred cows to see is the ROI still there.
Right.
Again, it goes to show that the team is doing everything it can to make sure that we have the best possible city finances for the city. So thank you all for what you do.
Yeah, Mike, do we have a page like page 35 to compare from 2000 to 2024 versus, now we are going from 2025 to
Hold on.
29?
I have to look at page 30.
Yeah, 35, yeah. So we have from this year to 2029.
Yeah, I think the best way to answer that is, if there's something that you would like, we have the data. So if there's something that you would like to see, as far as going back, obviously not tonight, but we can generate the chart according to what you're asking.
No, the reason I'm asking is we have different strategies, right? 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. The graph shows.
Correct.
How did we do with our projection in 2020 to this
We
year
weren't doing
today?
this, I don't think we were using.
Well, we're using the 5-year forecast, but
Every year we
we weren't implying these strategies.
Correct.
If that's what your question is.
Okay.
Yeah, so in 2017, 18, when
Because we
SB2
had-
came, when
right.
SB2 came out,
Right.
we knew pretty much what was going to happen on that. Then what causes us now to start changing our approach is because of 334. So now we started creating this new way of approaching it. So I couldn't go back and do what you're asking.
Okay.
I had the data for what our projections were, in 2020, but I don't have the strategy analysis.
Right. So even if you don't have the strategy analysis, by looking at that graph, how well are we doing with that projection?
Yeah, thank you, and we'll go back and produce those charts and get those out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I clarify something? So, just to make sure I understand, so the graphs that Bijou is referencing right here on page 35, those are the different strategies that were just presented to us that they walked through, right? So that
Right.
if we would have done anything, we would have been on that orange strategy, right? Because if all the departments came in and said, hey, here's all the stuff we want, we would have been on that orange
Yeah,
graph strategy.
And that's I'll use the term old. That is
Yes.
the old way, or the
Yes.
traditional way that the 5-year forecast
Yes.
was presented.
Excellent. And so what we see is as we go through the different strategies, that's the process of
It starts changing the
yeah,
directory.
the directors start
Trajectory,
getting
yeah.
together, trajectory of the directory. No. But you start like implementing these discussions. So after day 1, it looked like this. After day 2, it looked like this. And then as conversations continue, we should maybe potentially see another one, because what I see is in the red one was, this is the one, and so there's like one more piece where they're going to go back and look for other things. So we could see another line.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
I just
the genesis of all this, to be frank, is when we started running the last few years, really, we've been continuing to try to improve this process.
Yes.
was, as you continue to look at, again, SB2 and 334, and you looked at what's happening with expenditures, again, to not even do anything else, just try to sustain what we
Yes.
have, right? Keep in place. The expenditures through inflation are outpacing
Yes.
the capacity of our revenue generation.
Due to our 3.499 cap.
SB2 and 3 point.
Yes.
And the sales tax.
Yes,
right?
and the sales tax,
Right.
yes.
So, Bijou had previously asked one of the questions at one point in time. Yes, we won, yes, we're appealing, and by the way, they're appealing as well. If the sales tax solution is what we want it to be, what I have said to y'all all along is, that will change our trajectory.
Yes.
Because now we're going to have some revenues that we are not including in this analysis.
So, Matt, so 10 years ago, when we'd take a look at the 5-year forecast, we would see a curve that was really exponentially increasing. And that was where that 80 and 90 cent tax would come from. Now, when it came into the budget preparation, we never...
Yeah, the council never saw
we never
anything
saw
along
that,
those lines.
but that was the projection.
Yes.
And so, then when it comes down to the day-to-day or year-to-year operations, we were always very conscious. But so we're really kind of, I think one of the reasons Mike is having to put some caveats there, the adoption of SB2 created a huge change
Yes.
in the way that you look to the future. And so
Absolutely.
this is the new way.
I just want to say I appreciate the visual representation of the process that you guys described. I think that's a really cool thing. Don knows that I love charts and graphs and pictures and stuff like that, but it is nice to see a visual representation of...
In color.
Yeah, I like colors, they're great. But just really understanding that, like, the thoughtful process, of the assistant directors and the leadership team and the city CMO's office, that we are seeing some adjustments on that. So that is thoughtful to see.
Ramesh and the Bijou?
Thank you, Mayor. When I said, if we go back a few slides, I thought somewhere you said you identified potential alternative funding sources. Can you give us a little bit insight into that? I mean, is there any way where we could still deliver everything that the assistant directors wanted through maybe a feed service?
Okay, so when we talk about utilizing other funds, I haven't studied the list in depth to see what, but the other funds are like streets, IMF. Okay, interest was a revenue, as an example, that when the request was first made, that isn't even taken into account, it's when they start digging in. Crime control, as far as something that the police department may have been asking for. CRDC, something that community experiences might have been asking for. So that's what we mean by looking at alternative resources. What we have not done, at least I don't believe we've done, and Kim, I know she's concentrating over there. I don't think we have done anything related to increasing fees, if I'm correct. So our fee structure is what our fee structure is. I'm not saying that we haven't had an appetite to raise fees, but we haven't really heard anyone have an appetite to raise fees. Now, having said that, in community experiences, they do run financials, and they've talked to y'all before about not only the return on investment, but covering the cost of the programs and so forth. Excuse me. So certain departments do, but not across the board is the best way to answer that question. Related to fee generation. And let me add one more thing. Another thing that's happening down in Austin is they are putting restrictions on what fee increases could take place, for example, in building inspections and engineering. So it's more caps from creating the Austin gap in terms of what's going on. But I mean, that's what's given to us, and that's what we're going to respond to. And it's, it doesn't do any good to us about it. It's the way it's coming down.
Did you? Oh.
After this question.
No, you finish your thought.
I just had a comment. I looked at the interest rate, sorry, income on interest, and then we have the 4% inflation. And assuming the income on interest will always be slightly more than inflation,
Not necessarily,
not necessarily?
no.
Okay.
There were, go back, what,
I
almost
would
3
say in
years?
2008, right? We weren't earning hardly any interest. We went from like $8 million in interest to less than $50,000.
And then a few years ago, when the zero interest rate was in place,
Yeah.
even though we were part of the pool and everything along those lines,
They have to come down.
yeah, they all come down, so our investments come down.
And again, high level, hypothetically speaking, I always thought that the interest rates on the bond market is tied somehow to the inflation.
Two different
So,
things.
yeah, it is. Vanessa, what was the last yield you got? 4?
I
3.7
think
or 4?
pretty low 4.
And then talking with Jason, he had shared, the stock market went down recently. Normally, people then put their money into the bond market.
Mhm.
They did not do that.
Mhm.
So it had a negative effect on the bond market. So there's so much uncertainty right now that we can't say that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
as far as rates.
So Mike, is it this year or the end of last year we moved 38 to 40 million dollars or delegated to spend on certain projects from the sales tax revenue that we accumulated?
So over the last several years, we have been doing that. This past year, we moved 31 million.
31.
It's this year, it's in this fiscal year.
Again, last
We
year.
did it last year during the budget, but it's
25, 24,
fiscal year
25.
yes.
Yeah, this
31
fiscal
or
year.
38?
31.
31.
So that's because we were accumulating that extra sales tax, we putting in a special bucket or special area,
Yeah, designated,
designated area. That's where I want to compare with the 5-year plan that we had from 2020. If we didn't have that money,
What would that fund look like?
or how would we complete those projects?
Oh, it would just take more time. I mean, that's the simple answer, I'm sorry, but it would just take more time. For example, the capital replacement fund is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, right, in terms of what's going on. As we purchase something, we put that first year, whatever, it's being amortized in over like a fire truck, 10 years. So what we did a few years back is we took a look at the next 5 years for new equipment through the planning process and everything. We identified what those costs would be, and we put that additional sales tax in the capital replacement fund while we were still funding the capital replacement fund out of the general fund on an annual basis. So if we had not fully funded the capital replacement fund, let's say that fire truck again, then in that particular year, if it was a new piece of equipment that we hadn't been funding for replacement, it would have been a one-time expense of over $1 million that we would have had to come up with the funds for. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
The 31 million is not just the fire truck and capital expenditure.
Oh, no,
There were other projects,
yeah,
right?
the 31 million was different.
That's-
Right,
I'm talking
that's
about
what
just
I'm talking about.
the
The 31 million is for facility projects,
Okay.
and I believe we provided that to you in January, at the January retreat, the list.
I mean, but we can provide that to
can-
you again.
Yeah.
It's things like the fire station
All 3 of them.
rehabilitations for the 3 fire stations.
Mhm.
It's those types of projects.
Okay, yeah,
So when
thank
you
you.
ask, we would have to find the funding to be able to do that. It could have been from cash that we build up. It could have been from a bond issuance. There were different ways to approach those kinds of projects. In our instance, we're cash funding them as they come along.
Yeah, now we want to incorporate those kind of things into the 5-year projection. Do we?
It is not, if I understand your question again, they are identified as projects. They are not identified in the 5-year like as operations and maintenance as far as the growth or the particular request. Is that?
Yeah,
is that-
yeah.
Is
And
that right?
Councilmember Matthew, We did provide, I believe,
The
I walked
listings.
through the list, I did the listings, but as your question on the sales tax and how has it been used, the excess, I provided that information for each of the funds that receive sales tax.
Right.
Along with how we move some of it to the replacement funds. So we can send that
Yeah,
out
we
again.
can send that out again, just
Okay.
as a refresher.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anything else? We've got a couple of slides on a calendar, Kim, or
Just a second. Thank you, Adam.
So now that we've reviewed the 5-year forecast, I'd like to walk through the fiscal year 26 budget calendar, which is really the next step, starting in the budget process. And here you have the calendar. And also in front of you, you'll have a more detailed calendar, which provides a detailed layout of all of the important dates in the budget process. The green dates here on the slide, they represent opportunities for community engagement. We begin on May 27th, when council will provide guidance on service organizations you'd like to hear from during the first workshop. These organizations have submitted funding requests, and this will help us shape the presentations for you. So that's the meeting that the opportunity for you to provide us feedback on what organizations you would like presented to you at the first budget workshop. And then on June 10th, which is the next date here, we'll host our Budget 101 session. This is really a public event, also an event to inform the community about how the budget and tax rate process works in preparation for the formal budget workshops. The next dates are all the listed budget workshops. The first one will be on June 23rd. We'll review the special revenue funds, water sewer fund, and we'll also have the service organizations that you decide that want to provide a presentation to you. We'll have them provide the presentation that night. On July the 7th, that's where we'll focus on the general fund and the debt service fund. And lastly, we'll have the July 28th workshop, which is the final budget workshop. We'll incorporate all council feedback up to date. By then, we'll also have received the certified tax roll, which we received that on July the 25th. And we'll provide updates on the tax rate based on the values that night. Looking ahead to August, our charter requires that we file the proposed budget by August the 5th. We'll also hold our public hearings. The first one, tracking a little bit back, it's going to be on June the 10th for the Crime Control and Prevention District. And again, going back in August, we'll have our August 26th public hearing, and that will be for both the budget and tax rate. And lastly, we expect, our expected date for the budget and tax rate adoption will be on the same night, which is August the 26th. And that will take us into the start of the new fiscal year, which that's when the budget will take effect. And that's just a quick update on the budget calendar for the upcoming year. Glad to take any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for all the work on that. Item B is discussion regarding bond refunding.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This next item is a follow-up to a discussion from the January council retreat. At that meeting, we shared that we did have some bonds that were callable this year, and that we would work with the city's financial advisor, Jason Hughes, to determine if the bonds, if the bond market was favorable to do a refunding. And so the purpose of this discussion is to provide you an update. If you recall, there are 3 bond issues that are callable. The first 2 shown on this screen are tax supported, and they're the Series 2013 Certificate of Obligations, and then the Series 2015 Certificate of Obligations. We also have the Series 2014 Sales Tax Revenue bonds, which are supported by CRDC Sales Tax Revenue. I have been communicating with Jason concerning the timing of the refunding. The market has not been favorable for a refunding at this time. In fact, the next slide is going to show you the results had we refunded bonds last week. This is in your folder, but it's up here also. So this slide shows that if The 2013 COs that are circled in red had been refunded. We would have had a net present value savings of only 1.6%, which is at the bottom. And it's circled in red there. So that would have been a favorable, somewhat favorable refunding. However, if you look at the 2015 bonds that are circled in the bright blue, the we would have had a negative net present value savings if we had refunded those bonds. Similarly, if you look at the 2014 sales tax bonds, they're circled in gold. We would have also saw a negative net present value of 0.7%. And this really is because the current interest rates are higher than the rates on those bonds. So the middle column that has the kind of light grayish shows that if the market rates, if they decreased about 0.25%, if they were less, you can see that the 2013 bonds would have had a 2.6%, again at the bottom of the first in those columns, a 2.6 net present value savings, whereas the 2015 still would have had a negative net present value savings. However, the current market for the sales tax revenue bonds would have seen a 0.7% increase, or net present value savings. So what we talked to Jason about was in this market, if we wanted to look at refunding bonds, what would he recommend? And so he suggested that we do a parameter sale, if council wanted to provide that direction. But what is a parameter sale? So I wanted to share with you what that is. A parameter sale is a method of authorizing the sale of bonds where city council approves the transaction in advance, and the approval includes setting specific limits or parameters on key terms. And those key terms are, for example, the maximum par amount or the total bond amount that would be issued, the maximum interest rate, the final maturity date, and then the minimum savings required. This approach is allowed by Local Government Code Chapter 1371, and it gives the city the flexibility to complete the bond sale at the most advantageous time within the council-approved limitations. And so while this assures that the sale aligns with the council's intent and direction. So Jason with Hilltop would provide council with recommendations concerning all of those parameters. So are there any questions at this time just on what a parameter sale is?
Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, Hilltop Security, will they be taking a flat fee for this, or is it a performance-based fee?
I will get with Jason and find out. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay. So next I'm going to share the next steps. So if council wants to provide direction that we move forward with a refunding, then we would recommend, staff would recommend the use of a parameter sale. And then we would work with Jason with Hilltop Securities to finalize all of the parameter information, and we would bring that forward to council for consideration of approval to move forward if this is something that you want to do.
And Jason would be present that evening.
Absolutely.
To be able to answer any specific questions.
All of these.
If it's a direction you want to go.
Right. And so it's really just because of the extra market, it's not saying that we have this bond calendar that we're refunding and we're following the bond calendar and we're going to issue on this certain day. It really gives flexibility for him to watch the market, and should rates go to where it would be favorable based on the parameters that you're giving him, then he would enter the market.
So, Ramesh? Yeah, I did, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, again, personally, I'm not an expert in all of this, different levers or dials. Either we trust Jason or we get some professional help who can give us advice on what those levers and dials should be Because I would be hesitant to make a recommendation.
That is Jason.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we go with what Jason says?
Well, you're welcome to ask him those questions,
Okay.
and he will be able to give you more than enough detail on that. Bijou?
Yeah, so Mike, Jason works for Hilltop.
Uh-huh.
So how do we compare this same service to another agency to see the comparisons, how much they charge versus agency A charges versus B, so we have a better understanding? Or we only want to use this Hilltop?
Well, Hilltop, which had a different name before, has been our FA, our financial advisor, probably for 20-plus years, I guess, first of all, as a beginning. Secondly, there's only about 3 or 4 firms out there, and the way they're structured, based on my experience, they all charge about the same as it relates to fee structure.
Okay.
Why? Because they're financial advisors who are competing to get our business, if you will. And so there's, I don't want to call it collusion, but there's generally, the way that they charge their fees is about the same. What happens is, when they go out into the market, and we haven't, when's the last time we did a bond sale?
2024 is the last time we did a new money bond sale.
Yeah.
Was in 2024.
Right, and what they do when they do that, so this is the reason I'm answering the question the way I am, is based on the transaction itself. Their fee structure then is based on whatever the bond sale is worth, right? And refinancing, to your, what we don't know is there just a flat fee or not, because of the way it's being structured. So if, I'm not, yeah, I just, Hilltop, First Southwest, that's what they used to be called?
Yes, First
Thank you.
Southwest.
I knew there was a name in there somewhere. That's just been the city's financial advisor for a long, long time.
Kevin?
So I would just say, based on the way that the tax rate is structured, we have the M&O and the INS side, right? So if we pretty much committed to the fact that that we need to continue at the 3.499 to make sure that we have revenue to support increased salaries and things like that. I mean, one of the ways that we can look at affecting the overall tax rate to the citizens is looking at the INS side of the tax rate. And I'm just going to say this out loud. I'm thinking I'm going to say it, but if we are able to move forward with refunding some bonds, that would effectively reduce the INS side of the tax rate. Is that correct? Yeah. So
without impacting the 3.499.
Without impacting the 3.499. So I would be interested in talking to Jason, learning more about, like what the parameters were, if you will, because I definitely don't want to lose money on the transactions. But we do have cash that we are sitting on. So if there is an opportunity for us to look at that and see if that's the direction we want to go, without a negative financial impact, if you will, like we saw, I'd like to maybe explore some of those parameters without committing to like, yes, I 100% want to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I would be interested in looking at taking the next step in this process.
Kim, I'm going to be I want to make sure I understand the chart that you put in front of us here, or that you had up on the screen. The only bonds that we have that are even worth considering are the 2013 bonds. Is that correct?
Well, right now, really the ones that are the ones that have the negative. So the 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. This one. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I just
That
wanted to
has,
make.
in today's market, because the interest rate I think was 3.62.
If we were going to do it today, the 2013 would be the only ones that would make sense.
Right.
But the interest rates can change, and that story can change tomorrow. So understood.
Right.
But as of today.
And to follow up though to Ramesh's and Biju's question, when we look at that, that's based on the interest rate. What we don't know, what I don't have for you is when they put their fees into it, when it's all said and done, what the final number looks like, right? This is just based, so that's another way to look at that. This is just based on the interest rates and what's happening with the interest rates. This isn't the whole transaction cost.
And I would tell you, the minimum savings, that is going to take into, Because the par amount that you issue is gonna cover the principal outstanding, the interest outstanding, and any bond issue costs. That's what he would state that number at. So the minimum savings, you need to decide whether it's reasonable what he offers. So.
Okay, Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the point Kevin was making, I think we should definitely talk to Jason and be educated on when we should be making those transactions. This is a more for my information question. Kim, in that seesaw thing that you always talk about, I thought we said the INS, we want to keep it at a 0.7 or 0.07, is that right?
Yes, the goal, Mike, was to keep it at the .070151.
So I was trying to understand that and try to connect to what you were saying. So
Yeah, so to help with that a little bit, just as a reminder, what we do, the debt later, the
Weselator, right?
No, I didn't say that. The objective there is managing our debt. And if that's our target based on our conversations, as debt is coming off, it creates the opportunity to potentially issue debt for some of these projects that we talk about.
Yes.
So to his point, so even if you start this year, it'll probably show up in the during the calendar year of 26, because
Right.
it won't hit that first payment this in 25. So when we do the calculation for 25, 26, it might start showing up. And the increment is so small, so here's the rest of the story, that there's really no room to go and issue debt right now anyway. And so the market's, I mean, what we're saying is that the market, it's really not ripe for, but here's the deal. With the way things change by the hour, who's to say? In 30 to 60 days, let's say they don't get a budget deal done, right? All of a sudden, the market's going to respond to that. Say they get a budget deal done, the market's going to, and so what we're asking, and it sounds like y'all are supportive of, is to bring Jason. He will help you set those parameters that make economic sense. We just don't have the data now to tell you, here's what it is.
And I really want you to hear that if you refund the bonds, it may not impact the INS tax rate this year.
Yeah.
Because it
Yes.
really depends on when those bonds
The
get
timing,
refunded.
right.
100% understand that,
Okay.
but
For the
it,
fiscal year 26.
yeah, but I mean, just in the spirit of looking at years ahead as we were with the 5-year
Right.
forecast, we do think about, like, you know, what is the next 2-3 years going to look like? And so, to your point, if it's just going to be a little bit, you know, so where we can't even, if we do pay off early, it might create enough room, right, to, in a couple of years.
Yeah, but if I'm hearing you right, and Kim, this is what I think I'm hearing him say, so you check me on this. This is not paying off. This is refunding.
No,
and
yes.
And so it's refunding
I might
at a
be using the
lower
wrong
rate.
terminology
But no, but
as
it's
a
important because
financial layman,
we had
so.
talked at one time about, you talked about cash, we had talked about one time and we did the analysis of, well, what if you use some of that cash to pay off some of the debt? The trade-off at that time was determined, I'd rather keep my powder dry.
Yes.
If you recall that
Yeah,
conversation.
100%.
As opposed to paying off the debt, given the uncertainty of where we are right now.
Understood.
And we're actually reaping the benefits in terms of interest from not.
No, yeah, based on the conversation earlier, there's no doubt about it, so.
Yeah.
Don?
So I'm not hearing a lot of reason why we should refund anything,
Not right
correct?
now.
Not right now. And what was the sensitivity in that, like that middle, was the middle column the sensitivity, like
So, quarter,
if rates had done, how much,
Right,
a
0.2.
quarter more? So
Yeah,
even
so you would have went
really
from
even need more.
1.6 to 2.6.
Yeah, there's gotta be more movement.
You
Got
even
it.
need more than that even, right? And so what's the window of time, so they're callable from now until maturity?
Once they're callable, they're callable.
So at any point, whether we set the parameter cell or not, we could always if the market was to move materially, we could always determine to refund, even if we don't have a parameter sale set up, right? We could.
Yeah, I think it's just, if you were wanting to refund, the use of a parameter sale is what we would recommend because the market is continually fluctuating. It's not as stable as it has been historically. So the market is continually fluctuating
Yeah.
based on changes in policy. So,
You could even give him a time frame of, if we, I'm making this up, let's say he came to the first meeting in June, said, okay, we got 4 months. During the next 4 months, if these things happen and they meet your criteria, and at the end of 4 months, you don't have permission anymore, doesn't mean he's still not looking at refunding. It just means that parameter is taken off the table.
Okay.
and we look at this every January. I
Okay.
mean, that has been council's directive, is that we look at, are there any bonds that can be refunded? If so, are the market conditions right for that?
I guess I want to make sure I understand the objective is, I mean, like, you used the phrase, if we wanted to refund, which we would only want to if we could actually come out ahead, right? So,
Correct.
So why are we having, so do we need to have the discussion, because that's not the fact today?
That is correct, and there is an option that we have not offered to the council before because it hadn't been offered to us before, as far
Okay.
as the market, while the statutes allowed us to do that, the market's never been in this position like it is right now. And so Jason is offering, if refunding is important to this council, here is a way for us to monitor the market and be in a position to do the refunding like that. But in order to do that, you have to give Jason the permission.
Okay, yeah, no, that all makes sense. I was just trying to make sure, so does staff have a recommendation on what?
Well, if y'all are interested, it's not if you're interested, we'll bring Jason. He'll come and walk you through all that. And if you're comfortable with it and everything, great, y'all can choose to do it. If it's like, no, this is good to know, for whatever predictors you have, say, we're not ready to do this yet. Okay, great, you've been informed, the tool is out there. And if something comes up later, it's like, you know what, it looks like they got a budget deal. Let's fire that thing back up.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
wait till next January.
Okay.
I mean, it's really,
I'm fine getting educated on it further. It sounds like there's nothing to do right now, but I'm fine to.
Since it's never been offered to us, I think we all need to be educated on it.
Yeah. It's like an open order, like on a stock transaction or something, just sort of that type of thing. Okay.
okay, then I will work with Jason to find a time to come speak with you at the work session.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Don, it's almost like a put option for our individual stock. We can specify, sell the stock when these criteria come back. It looks like that's what we're doing for bonds now.
No, like a limit order.
Limit order,
Yeah.
All right, item number C is a discussion regarding the drainage utility district, or DUD.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Mr. Garza.
What a perfect night to discuss drainage after a few days of rain. Yeah, so tonight we're going to discuss the DUD fund, some of the projects that we have, and then some of the strategies that we are looking at in order to fund some of these projects. So just quickly, I want to give a brief history on the drainage utility districts, also known as DUD fund, also known as the stormwater utility fee. So the original fee was adopted by council in 2007, and it was to support the city's stormwater management plan, which is an unfunded federal mandate aimed at
Mike,
address.
we're going to take about a 3-minute recess, if you don't mind.
We only have 3 minutes.
Good. No problem.
For drainage.
Some of that when it comes back.
Start from the top. I do want to go back, start over from the brief history of the DUD fund, the Drainage District Fund. So again, the original stormwater fee was adopted by council in 2007, and it was to support the city's stormwater management plan, which is an unfunded federal mandate aimed at addressing flooding, erosion, and pollution of local waterways. Managing stormwater runoff requires regular maintenance of vital infrastructure such as storm pipes and lifts and drainage channels. Initially, the fee generated about $250,000 annually. And in 2019, the city performed a rate study, and council adopted the current rate, which began phasing with the updated fee structure in 2019, and it was fully implemented by 2023. That structure now generates approximately $2.6 million per year. Every 5 years, new requirements are added to the federal permit from the government. For example, in previous years, we were only required to sweep our major intersections and parking lots once a year. The new permit, which comes out this year, is requiring us to sweep every single street in town, which has increased our line item operating budget 5 times for that particular.
So are you talking literally with street sweepers?
Literally street sweepers, yes.
So unusual.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As these federal requirements continue to grow, our maintenance operations and the resources to support them will need to grow as well. So this chart here shows the projects that were identified from the 2019 rate study for a 5-year period. Now, it was only, the study only looked out the 5 years from 2020. And so on this chart, you can see that the first 3 at the top have been completed since then. And then to note, the Arborbrook Channel drainage project that's on here is currently in design with an estimated construction cost of $1.6 million. At the time, we were estimated at $500,000. So again, the 3 have been completed, which total about $1.8 million for those top 3, those first 3 on there. The others have been reprioritized. So these next couple charts or slides are going to show projects that have been identified for the next 5 years. These projects were not originally included in the rate study because they were not identified as priorities at the time. The study only projected needs over a 5-year period, and since then many of these projects have emerged due to unforeseen events, primarily related to weather and natural erosion. As priorities have shifted, some of the projects originally identified in the rate study were deferred in order to allocate resources toward more urgent needs. Additionally, the 2019 Master Drainage Plan identified new projects that have now been incorporated into our 10-year capital improvement plan. And we anticipate that other erosion-related projects will continue to arise over time, and we will need to evaluate and prioritize accordingly. So this slide and this slide, of these projects over the next 5 years, it totals about $18 to $20 million worth of projects. Now this slide projects even further out beyond the 5 years to a total of 10 years, and it incorporates an additional $10 million worth of projects that have been identified, for a total of about $30 million for the next 10 years in drainage projects. So next I will have Kim come and talk about strategies and recommendations.
So Mike shared with you where we started back in 2019 with the rate study and what we knew then. And he shared with you all the projects that have been identified for the next 10 years, or from 2025 to 2034, along with the estimated cost of those projects. So now we're going to look at whether the fund has the revenue to cover all of those projects. This slide provides a cash flow analysis for the years 2025 through 2029. It shows that beginning in 2026, the current rates do not support the cost of operations and maintenance plus the cost of the drainage projects. So remember that the rate study covered projects that were identified for 2020 through 2025 only. And since then, you know, as Mike mentioned, the federal government passed unfunded federal maintenance mandates, and staff has identified additional projects since the study was performed. This slide shows that the funds needed for the projects that have been identified to be completed through 2029 is about $3 million, and that $3 million is needed to fund the operations, maintenance, and those drainage projects. Also remember that the fund there must be funding available to cover all of the expenditures of the fund when you adopt the budget. So this next slide shows the projected cash flows from 2030 to 2034. The cash flow analysis for the 5-year period shows the projected deficit grows to about $6.9 million by 2034. What these two slides show is that staff either must reduce the 2026 projects by almost $2 million, and then there would be no additional projects after 2026 until we built up cash and investments to attain the level that would provide for the operations, maintenance, and additional projects. So what can we do to move forward so that we can accomplish these projects? Staff would recommend providing a $5.5 million advance from the general fund and performing another rate study. So the advance would allow staff to move forward with projects while the rate study is being performed. The rate study would inform the repayment period for the advance. It would address any changes in rates, and it would provide a recommendation regarding either the issuance of bonds for future projects, or perhaps another advance from the general fund, or maybe even a combination of the two. So if council provides the thumbs up to staff for this recommendation, then the next steps would be for us to bring an agenda item to council to approve the advance, and we would want to approve the advance in fiscal year 25 so that the funding is there for the budget that we would be proposing for fiscal year 26. And then we would also work with Public Works to establish a timeline for requesting that rate study to be performed, and it would be brought to council. So are there any questions concerning the recommendation and next step?
Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, thanks for the presentation. I agree with your recommendation. For my benefit, can you go back a little bit whenever the current rate was determined? I'm sure you guys put in a lot of thought, right? So why are we in the situation where the current rate is unsustainable? Did the expenditure for maintenance go way above than what we planned?
I would say that the rate study, Mike, you can help me because I wasn't involved in the rate study, but if you want.
Yeah, at that time, the rate study and the requirements from the federal government, the types of projects that we had at that time, plus the requirements for our stormwater management plan incorporated for that time period. Since then, projects have increased. We have noticed additional erosion in creeks and other and streams. Projects are popping up, and then the federal guidelines and federal requirements have increased as well on things that we have to do in order to abide by the permit.
There's also one more piece that y'all didn't mention. If you go back to the rate study, was it the 4.2 million?
Yes.
That was anticipated to actually issue a bond. So to do those projects would have required some bonding, right?
Correct.
And we did issue bonds in 2020. We went back and looked.
Yes.
We issued about 1.8 million in 2020.
But not the full 4.2.
But not the full
Yeah.
4. Yeah.
So what was anticipated plus the increased costs? And the fund is fine, so this kind of goes to maybe a way that you asked that question earlier. If we're willing to accept moving slower and just letting cash build up, then do project, then let cash build up, then do project, if that's the direction that the council would want to go in, that's how we could move forward. But the cost, like everything else, is getting more and more expensive. So eventually, there will probably need to be a rate increase. That's why we're recommending doing it kind of in a phase 1, and then doing an updated rate study, and then seeing how that thing works out.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick follow-up. As part of the study, will you also come back with a recommendation of rate increase versus issuing a bond? And or both?
If that's what you would like us to do.
I would like to do that.
What was that? I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question was, as part of this study, will they come back with a recommendation for option A, rate increase, option B, issue a bond, or option C, do a mix of both?
Well, one of them was the advance from the general fund.
So, yeah, if you go back to your recommendation.
So that is using existing monies, and what I was asking is the option to issue a bond, let's say that interest rates are really low.
Yeah. Is there an option out there to also or alternatively issue a bond? Yes. I was going to ask that next, so thank you. Did you get your question
Yes, sir.
answered? Okay, Kevin.
Thank you.
Yes, so I was gonna ask a question about the Arbor Brook channel drainage.
Yes.
So I know you said that, you know, originally you had budgeted 500,000, and then the project has grown, what was it,
1.6 million.
Yeah, 1.6 million. So, and I know, what was the time when you originally had that budgeted? Was that 19?
It was probably.
Or when it hit the
This when
forecast?
it was 19 when it hit the forecast.
Okay, all right, so, I mean, was that based on, like, I guess, inflationary issues that grew that much, or did the scope of the project?
The scope grew, and the type of improvements that we originally intended, we went a different, we expanded that scope to do, originally it wasn't going to be an underground system.
Yeah.
And so that increased the cost of the
Okay,
project.
and that's kind of what I was understanding is did the scope and you know the cost go up because we waited so long? Like that's what I was wondering. Like did it get so worse that it cost us more money because we waited, and then, but obviously if we change direction on the type of improvement, you know that could increase
Yeah,
costs.
the solution changed.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. Part of it probably was a little bit of inflation, but the solution did change.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was kind of my question. And so my point of getting that is that if we continue to put projects off, inflationary issues, scope increasing and things like that, it seems like it's a better option to go ahead and try to tackle as much as we can now, you know, and obviously the solutions of, you know, a transfer bond, you know, looking at bonds, looking at I mean, we have to look at all those things. That makes sense. My second question was, establish the timeline requesting for a rate study. I'm assuming that's going to be relatively soon. Is that, I know you don't have an exact time, but would that be correct?
That's correct. It's anticipated that if that's the direction we go, we would start that probably FY26.
Okay, and then that would be, so the rate study would be done in 26, and then we would get a recommendation probably relatively soon to figure out how to proceed forward.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you for that, I appreciate it.
And the advance would allow them to continue moving forward with projects while we have the rates.
While we're waiting for all the, yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Mark,
No.
you good?
Yeah, and
Okay.
and just to be clear too, on the advance, you actually have two options. On the advance, you can repay back the general fund,
True.
or you choose not to, you know, in terms of, it's a capital investment.
So I
It's-
would want that, because it's treated two different ways.
Yeah,
If you don't want it to pay back, it would be just a transfer, like we transfer money to IMF.
right.
If you want the fund to pay the general fund back, I would need to bring forward to you a council item so that you would pass that you are authorizing a loan to DUD. So I would
That
need
makes
that
sense.
direction too.
Right. And
Probably.
in the payback, we wouldn't recommend that you include interest for the payback. If you were gonna pay back, why would you do that to
Paying
yourself?
ourselves.
Right. So it'd be timed over a period of time to pay that 5.5 million back in some equal increments over some period of time.
I got a question, Mike, maybe Kent. Going back a decade or more, seems like our erosion is getting worse. Is there any obvious reason? I mean, we've had a couple of really, 2015 was horrible in terms of the summer for the flood. I know that kicked off a lot of things.
What we're observing and experiencing over the years, what we're noticing is there's a few things that are causing erosion in the creeks. One of the primaries that we're seeing are the trees. So we have all these trees that are on the banks of the creek or right along the edge of the creek. And as we get these storms and these heavy rains, some of them are healthy, some aren't. And we're seeing the trees falling, and then they're pulling the banks with them. And then they're leaving, and then the creek rises and it washes it away. And so that's causing erosion. That's one method, and that's one we're seeing most frequently is trees causing problems on banks. The other is just the nature of the creeks wanting to, there's a life cycle of the creek. I can go through all that, but it moves over time, and we're noticing it starting to morph. The geomorphology, it's starting to change courses and settle out, and it goes through cycles, but that's the majority of it.
And so what we're seeing, what we're calling erosion, is really just natural migration of the creek bed.
It is, yes.
And we're trying to intervene and prevent that.
That's correct. Most people attribute erosion to high velocities of creeks, and that's not the case. And as far as the models and the studies that we've done, we don't have really high velocities in our creeks. It's just the nature of the creek itself.
Thank you, that helps. Anybody? Kevin?
I have a quick question. Besides, so the transfer versus the loan, all right? So obviously when we do a transfer, then that money specifically is just for that fund, right? If we do a loan, I mean, is there any other advantage by then we are able to pay that back and then deploy those funds, back to the general fund for a variety of uses? Is there any other strategic reason why we would do one or the other?
I would tell you it's a philosophical question, and more so because of the strength of the position that you're in. That's why we could say to you, you could either do the transfer or the loan. If we were in a different financial position, I would say do the loan and then repay it back to the general
Just to
fund.
make the funds more available for a variety of things
Right.
if we were in a different financial position.
And you're giving the money up front, and you're gonna get it paid back over I was looking at 15-year payback.
In other words,
Based on-
instead of you paying someone interest, you're just,
I did look at if we issue $5.5 million in bonds. I think I used a 3.7% interest rate, which is roughly what we saw. And, you'd end up paying about $1.6 million in interest. So.
Don?
How far does the 5.5 million, how far down the road does that get us? The number of years or all those projects or what? How much time does that give us?
It'll get you through 2029, and then.
So it gives a pretty good runway.
Right, and then then I had another issue. If you just wanted to do advances, it's really about 11.5 million. You could do 5.5, and then I think it was in 2030, 2031 that you would need another 6 million.
Okay. You mean without doing a rate study, without adjusting rates?
But
Okay.
you would not be able to do, the projects that he's identified and that funding, because at the end of the payback period, because I did a 15-year payback period, there was only 399,000 left in fund balance.
Okay.
After all of that was paid
All
back,
right.
assuming no additional projects, and just paying for operations and maintenance.
Okay, unless staff has a different recommendation, I'm in favor of just doing the transfer, not doing the loan, just doing the transfer over, and I'm in favor of what y'all are recommending, doing the advance and doing the rate study, see where we need to go.
So doing a transfer, not requiring it to be paid back of the initial 5.5, do a rate study and see how we can do the rest of it.
That's what I'd be in favor of. Unless y'all have.
Yeah, it's the rest of the council. Thank you, Don.
Don, if we do the 5.5 transfer, do we still need to increase the rate?
Well, eventually we will, it sounds like, or do another transfer. It sounds, did I hear that right?
I would say that the rate study will inform that decision.
Yeah.
We could get the rate study into the 26 budget. We could go ahead and incorporate that, the cost of that, so that we can move forward. And we do a rate study every several years for the water sewer fund. To me, this is no different. Right, things change, and as it changes, you need to get better information to inform your decisions, so.
Or can you explain why you're in favor of that versus the loan?
Neither right or wrong, the rate, we have set rates at a certain level. We need more than that, but we have, because of the flexibility we have somewhere else, through whether it's sales tax or property tax, we've accumulated a lot of the funds already, so I don't know that there's any reason to borrow the money from ourselves and then do a rate study that says we need to increase rates potentially even more to do future projects and pay this back. I guess I just see we've already got the money that have come from essentially the same source, citizens.
Hypothetically
So-
speaking, again, I'm just thinking out loud here. If the interest that we would get on the 5.5 happens to be higher than the interest that we have to pay on a bond, I would think going the bond route might be a better option, a cheaper option for the
You
city.
got arbitrage issues? I mean,
We did, but it's starting to come down.
Okay.
I mean, Jason said, I think the bond issue when I was showing you the bond, that was built on 3.62% interest. And Vanessa, it was just around 4% that we earned. So you're not talking a lot. Because we're in the bond market. We're investing in agencies and discount notes, right, of the US government and Fannie Mae and Freddie. So,
back to your question, I guess I'm in favor of just taking, we know what this need is, that will get us, it sounds like the 29 or 30 or something, and we have the cash to do it, and we can do a rate study to prepare for beyond that, and we just do it and move on, because we've got the flexibility to do so. It's public works, you know, that's, I guess, gonna be my view, is it's okay to spend the money on it.
Well, I appreciate you. I guess I share a slightly different philosophy, but it comes down to the same thing. As you know, I prefer to keep it in the background for when we really need it, if we really need it, and it's not going to impact us one way or the other very much.
I would agree, it
Yeah,
doesn't move
so
the
let me
needle
just,
much.
let me just add this to it. Remember, this is for the next 5 years. So, to your point, there is not enough capacity in the world for us to go out and do all those projects. And so time is on our side, so both the council and the staff have the ability to adjust accordingly as we go through it. And I would almost be assured that there will be some issue that comes up that will knock one of those projects off because it needs to be taken up in a higher priority. To all of your points about the flexibility, this keeps us moving, creating the flexibility, and then allows y'all, when the time comes, to get that rate analysis, see what the projects are, and make a determination what you want to do about the rates. I think that's the biggest issue for us is it has been 5 years. We haven't really talked about rates of the DUD in 5 years, and it's just time. And there are projects, to your point, Don, and they are capital projects. They are infrastructure related, right, in terms of what they are.
And even if something knocked off the list, there'll be something right behind it, right?
Oh, yeah,
Next
absolutely.
man up,
Yeah,
right?
next
So-
man up, right.
Yeah, so,
Right.
there's no shortage of.
Right.
so am I hearing a transfer
That's-
rather
That was
than a
me, I
loan?
don't know what everybody else.
We need to know to build it in the budget. If it's a transfer, it needs
It
to
does
be.
one thing.
If it's an advance, it's a balance sheet. So,
And personally, I think between transfer and a loan, makes no sense to do a loan, just transfer.
Does staff have a recommendation on one or the other? Or, I mean, I know you said it's like a philosophical, but is there a recommendation?
Well, I'll say this. It's simpler to do a transfer.
Transfer.
it is simple.
Boom, there we go. I'm in for the transfer.
Okay.
That's all I needed to hear.
You got 3 of the 5 said transfer.
Okay.
5 to
this-
5.
This doesn't change
Don, you
my.
already voted.
No, this doesn't change my, but I'm just curious, is there a mechanism, if you transferred it,
voting, by the way.
could you actually transfer it
You already
back
recommended it.
later from future accumulation in DUD? Is that allowed?
Yes.
I mean, if
Yeah,
you wanted
yeah,
to.
yeah, if-
I didn't know if it was restricted, once you got into DUD, it was restricted and you couldn't.
No, I will, if you're using the fees and you have an accumulation of fees and you want to transfer money back from DUD back to the general fund, you can do that. If you issue bonds, You cannot use bond proceeds and transfer it to the general
Okay,
fund.
but if
They
you-
have to use for the projects.
But if we advance money over there and then, for whatever reason, 4 years from now, we've accumulated additional DUD fees.
Projects come in a lot less than what we thought.
We could transfer, that is possible, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
We're not restricted to
No.
just keep it at that, okay.
Nope.
Well, that seems to me
So,
just as flexible
to be
also.
formal, we are requesting that you bring this forth for a vote next council meeting.
Oh, you want it as a formal vote, not part of the budget process?
Well, there,
Wait,
We're good with bringing as part of the once we have this direction, we are good proceeding as from a budget standpoint. If it was going to be a loan, that was the one that she was
Yes.
saying you'll have to take.
so the transfer.
So
will-
transfer is
No.
straightforward, you've given us direction, we will build the 25-26 budget
You'll see
with
it in
a
the budget.
transfer. It will actually show up in the budget.
excuse me,
So-
I was trying to clarify that we were not taking the vote tonight,
Correct.
Right.
but we were recommending that you bring it forth as a direct transfer.
Yes.
I
And
should have said, Don, you've already recommended. That's what I should have said.
So what you will see, much like the IMF transfer of 31 million, we will show that 5.5 million separately down, so it breaks out from regular operations, from the general fund. We'll name it to DUD, and then you'll see the transfer coming into DUD. Okay?
Thank you.
I'm gonna write it down because I won't forget.
Don't forget.
And that's what I just,
Did you?
Yeah, so today's
like I told you
is
on
a
May
work
6th.
session, not a budget workshop, that's why we are able to do this recommendation.
Yes.
You're giving us direction.
And it will come, you will vote on it later,
Yes.
but she needed to know how to structure that for later.
Is it, Mayor, would it be fair to say that this is almost like pre-work for the budgets?
It is
Does
pre-work for the budget.
Just so staff has better direction.
The more clarity, the cleaner that makes the process.
All right, Kim, is that the end of the DUD?
I think so.
We were already to the question page, so I was assuming that was it.
Yes.
All right, item number D is a review of the fund balance policy. And before Kim gets into this, the first time I heard this, which was in probably 2013, I was confused. And it took me a long time to actually figure out fund balance policy. And this is the policy, which is what she's going to address tonight, from what I understand. So.
I'm going to address a couple of things. So I'm going to address the policy and I'm going to address the guidelines. Because we talked about both in June. So this is my last topic for this evening. And so attached to your agenda and then also in the folder, I did provide the fund balance policy as well as the audited excess revenue allocation guidelines. Both of those were given the thumbs up at the retreat in June of last year. So the guidelines state that after the audited financial report in late February or early March, the amount of excess revenue over expenditures will be determined. And then staff also committed to bringing to council, after the audit presentation, this item, which is on the agenda to satisfy that commitment. The guidelines also provided the categories to which the excess revenue over expenditures would be allocated. First, allocations are made on the fund balance policy, which requires various percentages of total expenditures to be set aside, specifically the 10% required by charter, the 15% council policy, and then the requirement that the undesignated portion of fund balance be maintained at 50%, again, of budgeted expenditures. So for reference, these requirements are listed on page 2 of the fund balance policy under section 5, and it's the funding levels for general fund. So once those policy requirements are satisfied, then the guidance comes into play. So staff allocates the remaining fund balance based on the categories shown in the last bullet point of the procedures section of the guidelines. Those categories are 2040 one-time projects, infrastructure projects, economic development projects, and then a strategic reserve. You will also find this in your folder, and it's on the printout of the presentation. So this slide shows the increase in fund balance, or the amount of revenues that exceed expenditures. It also shows the allocation of fund balance to the various categories under each classification, and then the change in each category that resulted from the allocation of the excess of revenues over expenditures, or again, the increase in fund balance. So I'm going to walk you through this presentation. It starts with the actual beginning fund balance of about $144.7 million. And then I'm showing you what the actual ending fund balance for fiscal year '24, and that's $160 million. So we have an increase in fund balance of $15.3 million, and again, that's the result of our revenues exceeded our expenditures. The next section shows the various fund balance categories. And so the first one, again, as I mentioned, is the non-spendable, and that's the 10% reserve of the fiscal year '24 and the fiscal year '25 budgeted expenditures. So this category right here changes and it increases because at the beginning of the year we know what the fiscal year '24 budgeted expenditures are going to be, so we take 10% of that. But at the end of fiscal year '24, we've built the fiscal year '25 budget, so we take 10% of those. So if you recall, the fiscal year '24 budget was $74.3 million, whereas or fiscal year '25 was 74.3, fiscal year '24 was 69.1 million.
Mayor?
So that's how you get those numbers. Do you want me to stop?
No, Kim, one thing that confused me is the column header you have fiscal year '24 beginning Feb, and you also say fiscal year '24 end Feb. Should that one of them be '24-25?
No. So this is at the beginning of the fiscal year, so this is at October 1st.
No, that means fund balance. The FB
Fund
is
balance.
fund balance.
FB, I'm sorry.
Oh.
FB means fund balance.
Sorry, to me
So
it looked like FE.
No, I got you.
So
Sorry.
it's October 1st,
Okay,
and then this is September 30th.
okay.
I will use dates next time. And so then the next area is the committed, and this is based on the 15% that's in the fund balance policy. Again, it's 15% of the budgeted expenditures for the years that I mentioned. I'm going to drop down to unassigned. So unassigned is based on, these numbers are based on 50% of budgeted expenditures, and again, that's per fund balance policy. So this assigned is really where your guidelines come into effect. So we have when we talk about, economic development, infrastructure, and strategic reserve. So what we did is we have the trails, and we increased that slightly. We have the median projects, and we increased that slightly. We have a designation for the INS property tax rate stabilization, and then we created a property tax reduction. This is lawsuits after certified value. So what happens, and so we took $5 million from here and put it down here. It's all related to property taxes. And then the other thing that happens is, because we've established what we want our undesignated to be, and we know what all of these are going to be, the strategic reserve is what grows. And if you look, this 15.3, so the change in all of the categories equals the 15.3, which equals the 15.3 in the change in fund balance. Clear as mud, or what questions?
Kevin?
Just a question. So on the strategic reserve, if we say that we want to use fund balance for a project or something like that, are we specifically talking about the strategic reserve because we have policies around everything else, like the unassigned, the committed, like all that stuff? So is that where that flexibility comes from?
So the $5 million that you're going to ask me that you've told me you want me to transfer from general fund to DUD, I'm going to reduce this line item by $5 million.
Perfect.
That's where it will come from.
Thank you.
And you were pointing to the strategic reserve?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, thanks for the presentation. So because we had a good year where we had more revenue than expenditure, our strategic reserve went up. In a bad year, that's where it would go down.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and.
And, yeah.
The reason why, so I'm gonna say out loud, between the charter, the policy, and the guideline, you have 75% of your reserve fund balance set aside. So, good year, bad year question, that number could fluctuate greatly. Because when you do the 10% and when you do the 15% and then you do the 50% and you have the others that are designated, that's where that line item's going to be. So my point on that is that gives you great flexibility, but that number could swing substantially.
Especially if we decide to take 10 million and give it to DUD, then...
Right. Now, one of the things that we've said all along, and Kim, correct me, we've estimated in here that roughly 8, 9, 10 million, I can't remember, as we've been talking about so many different numbers, that say the appeal is not successful, then we gave ourselves about 3 years, we isolated about 3 years of, I'll call it weaning, so that we could see what the real impact of the sales tax is. So that's in here as well, that we are constantly watching to make sure that we've got that set aside.
So, and also, just that very last item, the unassigned, when we really push the ratings agencies and our consultants, they won't tell you what that number has to be to maintain your AAA, but it's very clear that that number is, if we reduced it some, I don't know, and they won't tell you how much that is, our rating would be at risk. They're saying that that's a good number to be at, but they won't tell you what. I don't think there is a number. It's a very subjective, the ratings are relatively subjective. Vijay?
Yeah, Mike, the $20 million sales tax revenue, we are only using 20 million for the budgeting purpose, and the rest of the 20 million, where are we putting or placing those?
That's when you can't, the excess sales tax, so it shows up in strategic reserve.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's the number. That's
Right.
You understand the $20 million, it's coming from the excessive sales tax that you're putting in the
Yeah,
separate
it's just
bucket.
general fund.
If you don't have that, you will not have that kind of money.
Which bucket is that?
Strategic.
Oh, yeah, understood.
Yeah, CRDC and crime control also have excess funds as well.
But just understanding, that's not the whole.
Yeah.
Mike, follow-up question on the strategic reserve. You talked about in the worst case scenario, if we lose the lawsuit, to wean us out of the problem.
If we haven't, I'm sorry, I want you to finish your question, but I just want to say, we've been conservative in the numbers that we're using. If we're wrong and it's even a greater, that's where that money comes in.
Got it. So my question was, you mentioned 3 years worth of the balance.
Yeah, that's why I was saying we were figuring around about $3 million a year.
Okay.
That is a wag of, we had to come up with something to figure out how much should we set aside for that, right? In terms of, so we took, percentage of the sales tax.
So it's more like a guideline and not a policy.
It's clearly a guideline, it's not a policy.
Got it. Thank
And
you.
it's internal.
Internal, okay.
Right, it's just, the external is the undesignated being 50%. That's the guideline that
Right.
you've established, and the 10 and the 15%. The internal for us is, we will constantly watch to make sure, I say constantly, through the summer.
So the council did not have a say on what we want that number to be? as a
Well,
weaning?
I've consistently been talking about the weaning, about $3 to so million a year. So when you say it didn't have a say, I don't know what that means.
Sorry, I should have phrased it better. Did council say it has to be a minimum of this? Is that what you're trying to?
No, I understand that then. No, we just took our projections based on the analysis that was done. That's how we've been budgeting the sales tax that we have been using.
Good.
Any of the excess is on top of that. What I'm saying is, if we were to increase that and be even more conservative, we would have been using $3 million, let's say, less a year in sales tax, which would have made the Austin gap even bigger.
Got it. Yeah.
But that's not, the reality is we've been receiving it.
That's right. Thank you.
Sure.
That is all for me. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. All right.
Of course I will.
Item E is a fiscal year 26 work plan preview by Ms. Leach.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Have a very enviable position on the agenda of being between you and going home to your families. So I will be concise yet informative in my remarks tonight. You are passing around, there are two different documents. They will look very similar. One has the big header that says fiscal year 25 work plan. That is the multi-page one that's stapled. And then there is a second document that says at the top fiscal year 26 work plan. That is the single sheet that's double-sided. So I'm very pleased tonight to be here to present both of those documents to you. The fiscal year 25 work plan is a result of our commitment to the council based on the request that we heard from you, not this past January, but the January before that at the retreat. And there was a desire to have more frequent updates as to the progress of the work plan items. And so I am providing the fiscal year 25 document to you as the update, the mid-year update for our current work plan. Tonight I will be going over, so I'll be happy to answer questions that you have about that, but the intent of my presentation tonight is to go through the fiscal year 26 work plan that will be, is continuing to be developed and then will be in front of the council for consideration towards the end of the budget process. These are the council priority goals. So all of these should look familiar to you. They represent the 11 goals plus the 4 foundations. So I didn't have room on the slide to put the 4 foundation, but it includes the 11 that were identified during the retreat plus the 4 foundations. Pillar number 5 was the highest priority pillar, and every single goal under that pillar is represented in this prioritized list. Pillars 2, 4, and 7 have 2 goals represented in this list, and Pillar 3 has 1 goal represented in this list. We have some new features that are included in, so I apologize, I am now working off of the fiscal year 26 document. And so there are some new features that we have incorporated into that document that we have not done in previous years. So I do want to walk through what those columns represent for us. What we asked our teams to do as they were going through their work plan development process is begin the work to identify what it would cost to implement the work plan item that they are proposing. So if there is a dollar amount in that column that says estimated budget impact, that is new money that would be added, that is included in the budget that you will see later on this summer during the workshops. That was not something that we funded last year. Okay? If you go one more column to your right, this is the recurring operational cost. Now you just see yes, no, or unknown. So what I have provided there in terms of information is a very high-level indicator of whether that particular item will require additional ongoing costs. Now, those ongoing costs may be 5 years down the road. So for some of the items, if you take, for example, the dog park or the Magnolia Park trail, yes, there will be maintenance costs, ongoing operational costs associated with those. They won't be tomorrow, but there will be some costs. So that column there is to help provide some insight into if we move forward with these are the types of commitments that we will be undertaking over the life of that improvement. So I do want to share a little bit of information around the budget impact of the items that are included in fiscal year 26 work plan. So for Pillar 5, so anything that is coded in yellow is funded out of the Vision 2040 assigned fund balance. So in the sheet that Kim showed you, it is in that middle section. It will say Vision 2040 Council Initiatives. Anything in yellow is funded out of that 11.8 or $11.3 million. So the Pillar 5 initiative, so that is around creating business and innovation nodes. That was our highest rated and highest prioritized pillar. And all but $10,000 of that $1.1 billion is dedicated in support of Old Town. So there, if you look on your sheet, there are a number of individual improvements that contribute to that $1.16 million. They are listed there. Almost all of that is in support of Old Town. We have in Pillar 2, so at the very top, our One Coppell implementation. And so if you'll recall, last August, Lacey McKinney came and provided a briefing to the council about the evolution of what we formerly knew as Allies in Community into our One Coppell initiative, which we are now in actually year number 2 of that implementation. Pillar number 3, the implementation cost there for this upcoming fiscal year is 0. That is really just around exploring some options. So if you look at your sheet, every one of the 3 items under Pillar 3 start with the word explore. And so this year staff will be spending time to really understand what it will take to implement the items that are there. So for example, the small scale Neighbors Helping Neighbors event. So we love the one-time event that we have during the year. The community development team will be spending this upcoming year to figure out, okay, if we were to do smaller scale and it would be focused in particular neighborhoods or particular types of improvements, those are the things that they're going to be looking at. You know, how much time would that take? What is our capacity to do it? When should we do it? What would it look like? So those are the types of things that they'll be vetting through, but that's all part of that exploration process.
Tracy, just a moment.
Sure.
Ramesh.
Thank you, Mayor. Tracy, I apologize. A little while ago, I think talking about the estimated budget impact,
Yes.
you said this dollar amount is going to come out of an 11.2 million budget?
No, so if there is, so in that estimated budget impact column, if you see a number there, that means that is new budget money that was not included in last year's budget.
Got it.
And that we are proposing to include in this fiscal year 26 upcoming budget. The designations for the Vision 2040 funding that's in the assigned fund balance, that was for the items in Pillar 5 and Pillar 7. That's where the funding is coming for the items that are included in those 2 pillars.
So a follow-up, in other words, when we see staff time, when I see staff time here in this column, is that assuming existing staff or new or combination?
That is existing staff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
That's fair.
And I had a separate question.
Okay.
On the Neighbors Helping Neighbors, you're not suggesting that program be transformed into a continuous program as opposed to a single day event, are you?
what we're exploring is adding to the single day event.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Okay, so Pillar 4, the total cost to implement the items listed in Pillar 4 is $8,000, and that is all driven by the membership drive effort that we will be rolling out for the Village Collective. Implementation cost for Pillar 7 is $170,000. Almost all of that is related to, well, in fact, all of that is related to smart city initiatives. So either the marketing plan for marketing the city as a smart city, or for the strategic plan that that board will be undertaking this upcoming year. So all of that is in support of the Smart City Board. And then the foundation pillar, that is $2.1 million. Almost all of that is related to the council chambers remodel that is we're proposing downstairs. And that will be funded via the IMF assigned fund balance. In terms of the next steps, so where we would go from here, we're providing this document to you this evening. I am not asking for definitive decision-making tonight related to anything that you see in the work plan. You've got really between now and, the workshops and into August really in terms of providing feedback to us. Well, it probably needs to be in the workshops, because if there are any of the items that the council does not want to see funded, we would need to know that at the workshops. Also at the workshop, so if you recall the town hall meeting that we had at the beginning of April, we collected quite a bit of resident feedback from the participants who attended, and I think we had maybe 15-ish, which for that event was almost record-breaking, and so we were very pleased with that turnout. This document that is in front of you this evening does not include any feedback that we received from that event. We are currently at the staff level continuing to go through that list. Some items on that list are just, I'd like more info. We should have information on traffic signal timing. We should have our signals timed. We agree, and we also are doing things. So some of the suggestions and recommendations are things we can just answer. And so what we're doing is we're working our way through all of those items. We will be providing a response to every single recommendation, and that list will go onto the website, so it wouldn't matter if you attended or not. You'll be able to see that, all that information. But there are a couple things that could be in support of the priorities that are in this upcoming work plan. And I will highlight those items that get incorporated into the work plan when this comes back to you at the workshops. With that, it is a black screen, which is a good sign. I will answer any questions that you have.
So, I'm gonna move in front of Kevin on this one. The council chambers renovation, I see that is put down under Pillar 7.
Yes.
I mean, I realize that we put down the, maintaining city operations as part of the 2040 plan. I guess I'm not real clear that that's, I didn't see that as, a 2040 item. Could you kind of go into that one?
Oh, that's proposed to be funded out of IMF.
Not.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
that's the light blue.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I was just looking at it on the
It's
list.
part of the work for sustainable government.
Okay, yes, okay, got it. Thank you.
Sure.
The devil's always in the details. Kevin?
I wanted to ask a question about the, you said the 15 residents who came to the workshop.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So obviously they were listening in and staff was, kind of talking about projects and things like that. The goal of that feedback, obviously, is to maybe answer some questions that came up, but was the goal to take the feedback that they were and then present that to us to see if we wanted to include that in the budget for this year, or how it incorporates into our pillar? I just want to make sure I understand the objective for the feedback that was collected, how that's going to be presented and implemented. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes, so
Okay.
any of the items that
come from that list. They will show up here for y'all to provide some direction to us
Okay.
around. Most of those items, my guess, will end up having the word explore in front of them. Because some of those things, we're gonna have to do some due diligence to really know what it would take in order to do X or Y. And so, yes, they will be in this document for you. Some of those items, for example, some of the feedback was, we'd like to see more programming at the senior center. We can't do that. And those types of things may or may not even really need a budget adjustment. We can incorporate that into kind of our programming.
Understood, just, that, I wasn't able to make it that night, so I haven't heard the feedback, so I just wanted to understand how we were gonna receive that and how it's gonna be incorporated into the process.
I think the mayor said all the problems I identified were in your district.
That happens a lot to me, I've noticed.
District 4 is a mess.
I'm in charge of District 4 and the DUD evidently, so.
Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Tracy, like you promised, very efficient presentation. Quick question, and then I want to make sure I understood this correctly. The beginning of today's meeting, the assistant directors got together and you kind of finalized on 11 projects. Are those projects part of this, the completely different list? Okay. Sorry, I will follow up later. Thank you.
You got the floor.
Sorry?
You got the floor now?
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
I don't want to take other people's time.
Any other questions? Well, Tracy, did you have anything to finish up with, or?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good discussion tonight. Just a little note, I passed around a thank you letter from Ellie. I hope everybody had a chance to read that. Other than that, if there's no further business before this council, we are adjourned at 8:20 p.m.